Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Okay, so let's get into our first deep dive. We're looking at India's expanding role in maritime governance. The sources are calling it the Blue Ocean Strategy.
Mm.
And what's so fascinating is that this isn't some new reaction to, current events. It's actually deeply rooted in India's history.
It really is. You have to go all the way back to the UNCLOS negotiations.
The law of the sea.
Exactly, back in the 70s and 80s. Even then, India was this fierce champion for the idea that the seabed, beyond national borders, should be the common heritage of mankind.
A really principled stand to take.
It was.
Yeah.
And India very deliberately sided with the smallest, most vulnerable island states on this. It was all about global fairness, not just, immediate national gain.
And this isn't a new idea for India, is it?
Not at all. It echoes what Jawaharlal Nehru said way back in the 1950s. He said, and this is a quote, "Our future security and prosperity are closely linked with the freedom and the resources of the oceans."
Wow. So half a century later, that kind of leadership is needed more than ever?
Absolutely. The stakes are just monumental now. We're talking about the Indian Ocean, which is home to a third of all humanity.
And it's incredibly vulnerable to climate change.
Incredibly. It's facing rapid heating, acidification, sea level rise, and this other huge crisis, IUU fishing.
Let's just quickly define that. That's illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing.
Right. And IUU fishing, it just destabilizes everything. Coastal economies, marine ecosystems. It's a symptom of the immense pressure the ocean is under.
So the source argues India has a new historic responsibility here.
It does, to make sure the Indian Ocean becomes a laboratory of sustainability, not just another theater of rivalry. And that needs action, not just words.
Okay, so what does this Blue Ocean Strategy actually look like on the ground? The sources mention 3 pillars.
That's right. The first is stewardship.
Meaning?
Basically, treating the ocean as a shared resource. So a huge focus on ecosystem restoration and protecting biodiversity.
Okay, pillar number 2.
Number 2 is resilience. This means creating things like an ocean innovation hub. And critically, transferring technology to the small island developing states, the SIDs, to help them adapt.
Right, helping the most vulnerable. And the third pillar.
Inclusive growth. So driving sustainable economic models. Think green shipping, marine biotechnology, that sort of thing.
And is there money behind this?
Yeah.
Because ideas are great, but you need funding.
Well, the tide seems to be turning. The Blue Economy and Finance Forum in Monaco, back in June 2025, they announced 8.7 billion euros in new commitments.
That's a serious number.
It is. And on top of that, at COP30, the Brazilian presidency launched the One Ocean Partnership. That's a $20 billion ambition to get capital mobilized for ocean action by 2030.
So a lot of this is about connecting security with sustainability. It's a shift in thinking, isn't it?
It's a huge philosophical shift. Insecurity in the Indian Ocean, it's not just about naval balances anymore. It's fundamentally about ecosystem collapse.
So things like coral degradation, more intense storm surges.
Exactly. Those are the new security threats. And India's doctrine, cybersecurity and growth for all in the region, which was laid out back in 2015, it's the perfect anchor for this whole strategy. It lines up defense with environmental stewardship.
It's the framework that holds it all together.
Perfectly. And the guiding principle for this whole thing is really summed up beautifully. From the Indian Ocean for the world.
And there's a deadline of sorts, isn't there?
There is. The BBNJ agreement, which is the big one for governing the high seas, is expected to come into force in 2026. So the next year is just pivotal for India to really lead the way on this.
Okay, let's shift from that global strategy to a really tricky domestic issue. India's GDP calculation crisis.
Right, and it's this stunning contradiction.
It really is. You have this huge Q2 growth number, 8.2%, and at the exact same time, the IMF gives India's national account statistics a C grade.
The second lowest grade possible.
And the most fascinating thing here for me was the media's reaction, or, well, the lack of one.
Total silence. It was almost completely ignored, especially by the pink papers, the financial dailies.
The very papers you'd expect to be leading with this. It's a huge red flag from the IMF about the reliability of our core economic data.
And only one paper, The Hindu, actually made it a front-page story. It really makes you question what kind of economic news gets prioritized for the public.
It does. So let's get into the why. If the economy is supposedly growing so fast, why the terrible grade. What's the flaw?
Well, the core problem, and experts like Pranab Sen and Arun Kumar have been pointing this out, is that we rely on a very dangerous assumption.
Which is?
We use data from the formal organized sector as a proxy to estimate what's happening in the massive unorganized sector.
And that unorganized sector is still a huge part of the economy, right?
It's nearly 30% of GDP outside of agriculture. The assumption is just that, well, they assume both sectors always move in the same direction.
But we know that's not true, especially when there's an economic shock.
Exactly. We saw it during demonetization, we saw it with the GST rollout, and we definitely saw it during the COVID-19 pandemic.
What happened in those cases?
In all of those shocks, the organized sector actually consolidated its share, sometimes it even grew, while the unorganized sector just got hammered, declined sharply.
So by using the formal sector as a proxy.
You end up significantly overestimating how well that huge 30% chunk of the economy is actually doing. The experts are blunt about it. They call the data less than reliable.
And why does this matter for, the average person or for policymakers?
Because if your data is unreliable, your policy will be ineffective. You can't design targeted support if you don't know the real level of distress in the unorganized sector.
So financial help or labor market adjustments might completely miss the mark.
Completely. And it's even worse for the quarterly estimates that the media gets so excited about. Professor Sen says those rely almost entirely on these assumptions because you just can't collect the physical data that quickly.
So what's the prognosis?
It's not great. Until India can shift to actually collecting most of this data physically every quarter, the fundamental problem isn't going away. And the IMF's concerns aren't going to be resolved anytime soon.
Okay, from the macroeconomy to a tragic micro-level failure of governance, let's talk about the horrific nightclub fire in Goa, the Birch by Romeo Lane.
A terrible incident. It happened on December 6th during their Bollywood night in Arpora. The fire started near the stage and it spread incredibly fast right before midnight.
And the accounts all seem to point to the club's construction as the main failure.
Absolutely. It was built with highly flammable materials, bamboo, wood, palm leaf decorations everywhere. They basically acted as accelerants.
And the human cost was just devastating.
45 lives lost, 20 staff members, and 5 tourists.
The personal stories in the source material really bring it home. They mention Isha Kaku, an IT engineer.
A heartbreaking story. He and his friends had actually made it out safely, but he realized he'd left his mobile phone inside.
And he ran back in for it.
He ran back in and never came out. Just a devastating detail.
And the survivor accounts, people like Bhavana Joshi and Ami Minocha, they reveal these huge systemic safety failures.
They do. The first floor dance area had only one entry and exit point. Just one.
One way in, one way out for a whole crowd of people.
And it gets so much worse. That same single passageway was also the only way down to the basement kitchen.
Oh, no.
And that's where most of the staff victims were found. They were trapped in the basement with no other way out, no independent fire exits, no visible fire extinguishers.
Just a complete death trap.
It was. One survivor said the DJ was trying to fight this growing blaze with a bottle of water. They were totally unprepared.
And looking at who the victims were, it tells a much bigger story, doesn't it? About migration to Goa.
It really does. The 20 staff members came from all over different states in India, even Nepal.
The source gives the example of Rahul Tanti.
Right. He left a job on a tea estate in Assam that paid just 200 rupees a day. He came to Goa looking for a secure future.
And it wasn't just about the money for everyone, was it?
No. For some, like Jitendra Singh from Uttarakhand, they came because Goa just had this reputation as a fun place to work. It represented a better quality of life, not just higher wages. It shows migration is about dignity and security, not just simple economics.
And of course, the legal fallout has begun. The owners were booked.
Yes, the Luthra brothers and their partner, Ajay Gupta, booked for culpable homicide. The Luthra brothers actually fled to Phuket, but were later detained in Thailand.
But the real story here is the regulatory crisis, this whole tragedy exposed.
That's the key takeaway. Activists are saying that these kinds of safety and building violations are just the norm in Goa. There's this belief that if you enforce the rules too strictly, you'll scare away investment.
And the Birch nightclub itself was a prime example of this.
A textbook case. It violated coastal regulation zone norms. And even more fundamentally, it was built on protected land salt pan and fish farmland. That's a clear breach of the Goa Agriculture Tenancy Act. This wasn't just a fire safety problem. The building was illegal from the ground up.
And the official response is just a masterclass in finger pointing.
It's the definition of regulatory paralysis. The local panchayat says they ordered the club to be demolished.
Oh.
But the director of panchayats issued a stay on that order. Then the local MLA jumps in and says the panchayat never had the authority to issue the permit in the first place. Everyone blames everyone else.
So no one is accountable?
Exactly. And that's why the conservationists quoted in the piece conclude that the only real defense against this kind of illegal development is eternal vigilance by the citizenry. If the system won't police itself, the people have to.
That theme of accountability continues in our next piece. We're moving to India's deportation crisis, which really intensified in 2025.
It did, and it was framed by the government as a matter of national security. The Ministry of Home Affairs ordered a nationwide crackdown in August 2024.
Which then ramped up after the Pahalgam attack in 2025.
Right, and the scale and the speed of it were just shocking. Human Rights Watch found that over 1,500 people, including women and children, were expelled to Bangladesh in just over a month, between May and June of that year.
And the sources use the story of one woman, Sonali Khatun, to show the personal impact.
It's a harrowing story. She was arrested in Delhi with her husband Danish, who's a Kambadiwala, and her son. And she says that even though they had Indian documents on her, voter ID, the police coerced her into saying they were Bangladeshis.
And then the actual deportation was a nightmare.
A complete nightmare. She describes being flown from Delhi to Assam and then literally pushed across the border on June 26th. Authorities apparently threatened to shoot them if they tried to turn back.
And the immediate result was that they were then arrested in Bangladesh.
For illegal entry. So these two families were imprisoned in Bangladesh for 3 months. A truly devastating consequence.
But the courts did step in, right? The Calcutta High Court quashed the order.
It did. It was a brief moment of relief. The court found that the authorities had acted in hot haste.
What does that mean? Legally?
It means they violated a key MHA memo. That memo says you have to conduct a proper documented inquiry before you deport someone, and they just hadn't done that.
And then the Supreme Court got involved.
Yes. And after their intervention, the center agreed to bring Sonali back. She was 9 months pregnant at the time, so they repatriated her and her young son on humanitarian grounds.
Which was then framed as a political victory by West Bengal's chief minister.
Mamata Banerjee, yes. She framed it as a win against what she called an anti-Bengal government.
So Sonali and her son are back, which is good news, but the story doesn't end there.
No, and this is the crucial, painful detail we can't forget. Sonali is back, but she's deeply traumatized. Her son is now terrified of the dark after what they went through.
And her husband is still in Bangladesh.
Her husband, Danish Sheikh, is still imprisoned in Bangladesh, along with another woman, Sweetie Bibi, and her 2 sons. They are still there.
And you hear Danish's voice in the article over the phone, asking if it's a crime to migrate for better work.
It just cuts right to the heart of it. They're not migrating for political reasons. They're moving out of sheer economic necessity. The local work they could get, like beedi rolling, it just isn't enough to support a family.
So you have this brutal intersection of poverty, a porous border, and a really aggressive security crackdown that just seems to steamroll basic due process.
That's a perfect summary of the situation.
Okay, next up, we're diving into the very dense urban landscape of Bengaluru. It's dealing with a growing problem of human-wildlife conflict.
Yes, and it's being driven by rapid urbanization. All the metro construction, new roads, the insane traffic, it's all fragmenting the natural habitats around the city.
Which leads to a surge in animal rescue calls.
It does. But there's a positive side to that, too. The sources say public awareness has really improved, so more people are calling for help for an injured animal rather than, trying to harm it.
What are the main threats these animals are facing?
The #1 threat to birds, by far, is manja.
The glass-coated kite string.
Exactly. The numbers are just staggering. One organization, People for Animals, said they rescued 11,000 black kites.
11,000 from just one threat.
It's unbelievable. And another center, the ARRC, saw an 89% jump in manja cases in October 2025 alone.
And it's not just the common birds, is it?
No, they're seeing victims like booted eagles and mottled wood owls. You also have a lot of collision injuries, migratory birds flying into these huge reflective glass buildings that are all over the city now.
So why is this conflict so intense in Bengaluru specifically?
Well, Bengaluru has this really unique geography. It's one of the only big Indian cities that's basically sandwiched between two protected areas. You have Bannerghatta National Park to the south and Hesarghatta Reserve to the north.
And this leads to a pretty surprising finding in the sources.
A really surprising one. A recent survey estimates that there are between 80 and 85 wild leopards living on the city's outskirts.
85 leopards. That's more than Mumbai, which is already famous for its leopard population.
It is. Mumbai has a documented population of 54. So Bengaluru is a real urban anomaly. The city's fringes still support tigers, elephants, holes, gar. It's an incredible ecosystem right on the doorstep.
So where is the conflict most concentrated?
It's really intense around Bannerghatta National Park. You see frequent elephant raids on fields, tragic road deaths of leopards, and bison straying into new housing developments.
And what's the core reason for this?
It's a regulatory failure. There's a chronic lack of enforcement in the eco-sensitive zone, the ESZ, around the park. The master plan that's supposed to control development still isn't ready, years after it was notified in 2020. And huge projects like the Peripheral Ring Road are just slicing up these vital wildlife corridors.
So if you can't stop the city from growing, what's the takeaway for residents?
The experts all agree development isn't going to stop. The key is better, more sensitive planning that respects these corridors, but ultimately it comes down to a mindset shift.
A shift towards coexistence.
Exactly. There are still so many misconceptions. People fear bats and owls, but they are essential for pest control. People fear snakes, but they keep the rodent population down. The biggest misconception is that these animals don't belong here. They do. We just need to learn to live with them.
All right, let's now pull back the curtain on the murky world of Telugu cinema piracy. It seems 2025 was the year this whole nexus was finally cracked.
It really was. This was a huge coordinated operation. You had the Telangana Police, the I4C, that's the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, and the Anti-Video Piracy Cell, the AVPC.
And they had a major breakthrough.
A huge one. They intercepted Ravi Amandi of the piracy site Iboma in Hyderabad, and the scale was just immense. They seized 21,000 films, and the police think he earned around 20 crore rupees, which he was laundering into property.
But the most critical finding here is that the piracy itself wasn't even the main crime.
No, it was just the front door. The investigators found that when users went to these sites to stream films, they were being secretly diverted to betting platforms.
And from there,
it enabled much more serious crimes: identity theft, data mining, financial fraud. Law enforcement is now calling piracy a transnational polycrime.
and they're using pretty sophisticated methods.
Encrypted Telegram channels, servers hosted overseas in places like Switzerland and the Netherlands, and all the payments are hidden using cryptocurrency.
The range of people arrested really shows how complex this is.
It does. You have Ashwani Kumar, who is allegedly hacking servers to get perfect HD prints. You have Cyril Infant Raj, who is managing a group called One Tamil Blasters and earned 2 crore in crypto. And then you have Janakiran Kumar, who was using the old school method, just secretly recording films inside movie theater.
And they were getting bolder and bolder, leaking huge films on release day.
Yes, like HIT. The third case. The financial loss to the industry is massive. The AVPC estimates it at 3,700 crore rupees in 2024 alone.
Is there any good news after this crackdown?
A faint silver lining. There are fewer of those pristine, razor-sharp HD versions leaking now. And sometimes the leaks are delayed by a day or two, which can make a big difference for a film's opening weekend.
This sounds like a problem that one state or even one country can't solve alone.
No way. It's completely transnational. That's why the I4C has been so important for coordinating everything. And there's a new agreement with Japan's anti-piracy group, CODA, which shows this is now being treated as a global fight against organized crime.
So what's the next big challenge in this fight?
The next battle is holding the intermediaries accountable, the web hosting companies.
Why is that so difficult?
Because right now it takes 24 to 36 hours to get them to take a pirated link down. And in that time, a dozen mirror sites have already popped up. It's too slow. And as one producer pointed out, we have to remember the user's privacy is also at risk here from all the malware and data theft on these sites.
Okay, for our final deep dive, we're looking at China's aggressive use of global surveillance to hunt for fugitives abroad. The operations known as Fox Hunt and Skynet.
And we start with the really gripping story of Li Chuanliang, a retired official who fled to the United States and sought political asylum.
So he thought he was safe in the U.S.
He did, but the Chinese government tracked him relentlessly, even on American soil, using advanced surveillance tech. His calls were monitored, his assets back in China were frozen, and his movements in the U.S. were constantly tailed.
And the tactics they use to force people to return are just terrifying.
They really are. The source says over 40 of Lee's friends and relatives were identified and detained to put pressure on him. That included his pregnant daughter.
How do they even find all these people?
In some cases, by tracking cab drivers using facial recognition software. It just shows the incredible reach of the state's digital network.
And this is happening on a huge scale.
A massive scale. Operations Fox Hunt and Skynet have in total coerced or arrested over 14,000 people from more than 120 different countries.
But how does the U.S. view this?
The U.S. has been very critical. They call it a threat and an affront to national sovereignty, because the whole point of these operations is to send a message that there is no safe place to hide from the state.
And there's a really unsettling irony here about where this technology actually came from.
Yes, a lot of the foundational tech originated in Silicon Valley.
So American companies.
Yes,
Yeah.
companies like IBM, Oracle, and Microsoft. The article specifically mentions IBM selling its I2 surveillance software to China's Economic Crime Investigation Bureau. This software is incredibly powerful. It can mine texts, payments, flights, calls, everything to map out a target's entire social network.
What's IBM's response to that?
They say they sold that I2 division in 2022 and that they have robust processes, but it's clear the technology enabled this global, very intrusive hunt.
Now, Beijing's official reason for targeting Lai is corruption.
Right, that's their claim. They accuse him of corruption worth about $435 million. But Lee's counterclaim is that he's being targeted for political dissent.
For speaking out against the government.
Exactly. He started something called the Chinese Tyrannical Officials Whistleblower Center while he was in the U.S., and a review of his case suggests the charges might have been built on coerced confessions. So it's this intractable conflict between a state's right to fight corruption and its use of that fight to stifle political criticism. You know, if we take a step back and look at everything we've discussed today, from the oceans to the economy to these transnational crimes, there's a common thread running through it all.
And what's that?
It's the challenge of accountability. This huge accountability gap in our interconnected world, whether it's illegal construction on protected land in Goa or the opacity in our own economic data.
Or cybercriminals using servers in one country to target users in another.
Exactly. Or a global superpower using surveillance tech to reach across borders and silence its citizens. In every case, the systems of power, whether they're economic, political, or criminal, are using hidden layers and jurisdictional gaps to operate with impunity.
And our systems of accountability are just struggling to keep up.
They're struggling to catch up with the pace of it all, which I think leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If power can operate globally and in the shadows, what is our role as citizens and as an informed public in demanding transparency and integrity across all these different spheres?
That is a challenging question to end on. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.